Hello everyone and welcome back to Seduce Me to the Demon War. This time we are doing some of Erik's bad endings since I didn't get any. So here is the first one. Finally the spirit made itself known. The space around me brightened to reveal a patch of forest. The image of my surroundings flickered and swayed slightly, reminding me that this was only an illusion in my head. In the center of the space, however, appeared the spirit in its orb shape. Would I ever see what the spirit actually looked like? I finally walked over and stood before the spirit. We're doing this so you can get out of my body.
But what if I don't want to leave?
I suddenly became afraid. The spirit didn't want to leave. The air became cold as the spirit bobbed up and down in place casually.
In here, I'm safe from the evil man. He can't find me here, and he can't hurt me.
But we're gonna kill the evil man. The spirit stopped bobbing in the air and pulsed a wave of energy, shaking the forest around us gently.
How can you kill the evil man?
We've been preparing to for days. The spirit circled around my form in observation.
I can help you, though. I really can.
I'm not listening anymore.
No, listen, I can. I can protect you from being hurt. Really.
The forest began to quake and suddenly shifted to a sight I hadn't seen in a while. My heart suddenly became light as I gazed at the room around me. My room.
My dear.
Suddenly I felt a pair of arms wrap around me. They felt like snakes slowly sliding along my body, with one across my chest and the other around my waist. Both pressed my back tightly against a warm and somehow familiar body. I felt disgusted by the act, but found no strength to fight back. A head caressed my shoulder and the side of my neck with a tortuously slow touch.
My sweet, delicious bride-to-be. You'll spoil a demon such as me.
Erik?
I can help you fight him off.
This was an illusion. This was some sort of trick to make us believe in the spirit. I knew it, but the fear within my body became real as Erik's fingers danced over my body. I didn't want this. A warm glow in my chest began to pulsate as a lavender wave of energy pushed against the arms around me.
What the?
Use my magic. Get him off of you.
On its own, the magic in my chest burst forth, forming a barrier around my body and pushing the illusionary Erik away from me. I barely turned in time to see the image fade like dust blown away by the wind. I never imagined seeing Erik vanish before my eyes, but I became a witness to the illusion of it, causing my heart to feel torn. I felt tears collect in my eyes, but my mind became chaotic. What was I doing? Stop it! Yeah. I knew what was happening. The spirit was trying to show me an example. I wouldn't let it influence me. My scream echoed and shook the room.
Princess!
The image around me quickly reformed to the forest from before, and I watched as Erik appeared from the brush. The spirit quickly moved to be near my side as Erik glared at the spirit.
That's enough!
No! I won't do it!
Erik's glare could almost kill. As his ethereal tendrils appeared around him, the spirit began to pulse defensively.
You leave me no choice.
Erik lunged forward and charged at the spirit faster than I had ever seen him move. The spirit put up a large barrier around itself, similar to the barrier it had me in when Sarah tried to expel it. Erik's tendrils in rapid succession began to jab and slam themselves into the barrier, attempting to break it.
No!
I had to stop this. I didn't want the spirit to get hurt, but I didn't want Erik to get hurt either. Stop it! I ran for them, for them to stop. The spirit needed to be angry, but not like
Princess,
this.
stay back!
I won't do it! No!
The barrage continued without mercy.
Listen to me! I can help you! Don't do this!
With each strike Erik threw at the spirit, the barrier quaked and pulsed with energy. Over and over, the sound of magic clash reverberated through the space we were in, making the imagery around us vibrate. Erik's face hardened into a look of pure determination and anger. He truly wished to help me and protect me. But the spirit was still a child. What was I going to do? We had to make it take control. Attack it. I wouldn't give up, so I had to aggravate it as well. If making it angry would make it take control, then that was what I had to do. I charged forward. I slammed a fist into the barrier, feeling a hot burn against my skin. However, I knew that I wasn't truly injured. The spirit wouldn't dare hurt me like that.
What are you doing?
I'm sorry. Erik increased the speed of his attacks, and soon our barrage on the barrier began to weaken, break through as it began to crack and fade with each punch. The spirit started to whimper.
No, please.
My heart felt like whimpering as well, but enough was enough. I had to fix this. With the final attack, Erik and I landed a blow together, smashing through the barrier and impacting the orb. To my surprise, the attack landed against what felt like a glass orb. As the final blow made impact with the spirit, a rush of bright light engulfed the area. As it did, I felt my form spasm and flicker, causing me to look down at my hands. Through the blinding light, I could see them trembling as they slowly began to turn transparent. What the? I looked up to see Erik rushing to me, panic written all over his face. What was happening? I began to run for him, but felt my body move in the opposite direction, drawing me further away from the one I loved. Erik! Why couldn't I get closer? Soon Erik vanished from my sight, and I became lost in white light. I felt weightless, and my senses no longer worked. I was trapped. I could only just barely feel myself shed tears from how frightened I was. What was happening?
She's gone.
What?
What? What happened?
Erik, where is she?
No! No! Love! Get up! Wake up!
Oh my god.
Damien, the spirit?
Gone too.
Oh, no! No, this can't be! No!
What did the spirit do?
It sacrificed itself and took her with it. That body has no soul. She's...
No!
If I can't live, you can't either. Well, that'll be it for this one, and I will be back with another one in a little bit. So thank you all so much for watching, and I will be back. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Seduce Me to the Demon War. This is the second part of Erik's bad route, so let's continue. As we finally entered the space where the battle was happening, we stopped at the doorway, spotting Diana slam her saber over and over onto the Demon Lord's sword, which was held over his head like a shield. From the look of it, the Demon Lord was severely wounded and was trying to hold out against Diana's barrage of blows. Diana wasn't looking too well herself, but she seemed to have the upper hand. What was scary was that Diana's face was completely smeared with blood, intensifying the frightened look of rage and anger in her eyes. Every swing was reckless, powerful, thrown to eventually hack into the Demon Lord. To her displeasure, the Demon Lord was able to block each time. Erik and I slowly stepped in, watching as Diana continued to beat steel into steel in an angry rage, trying to find an opening, becoming more enraged with each block the Demon Lord pulled. Slowly his body began to glow, pulsing with red energy.
Enough!
With a blast of red lightning, Diana was sent flying back, slamming against a pillar and falling to the ground with a thud. Diana! The Demon Lord seemed to ignore my shout as he stood and began to walk over towards Diana's fallen body. Diana tried to press up onto her hands, stumbling and buckling a bit before she glared up at the Demon Lord while he approached.
I should have waited until you came back, so I could have killed all of you in one fell swoop.
Diana's glare intensified as large black and purple flames began to engulf her body from the rage that ignited within her.
You bastard!
Pouncing off the ground, Diana formed a new saber in her hand and flew at the Demon Lord, swinging it to slice its throat open. However, the Demon Lord parried, and locking steel once more with her and leaned in with a hard glare of his
How
own.
does it feel to be the only one?
I'm gonna turn it down a little bit. There. Diana snarled as she slammed her feet into the Demon Lord's chest, forcing him back and causing her to catch herself on her wings, remaining in the air. The voice that erupted from Diana's mouth sent shivers down my spine.
You don't even deserve the mercy of death!
Erik instinctively placed an arm in front of me, staying put and watching intently. Both of us were sure that Diana possibly had this, but we didn't want to get in the way of her rage if she was going full-out berserk. The Demon Lord let out a life before pointing his hand at Diana, summoning a large bolt of red lightning to shoot out and slam into Diana. Luckily, she had her sword between them and blocked the lightning from the skin. Whatever. Still, she slammed back into the pillars before and held there against a stream of heavy red lightning.
You're losing your power, succubus! Just like your weak parent!
With a tearful scream, Diana began to push back, shaking and gritting her teeth. The wounds on her body began to bleed profusely, but she eventually sent a wave of purple flame-like energy into her sword and letting it climb up the lightning bolt into the Demon Lord's hand. The Demon Lord quickly pulled his hand away, revealing a sizzling and burning aura around his palms and fingers. Diana weakened and fell to her knees, exhausted but not out yet. Her eyes still bore into the enemy, not ready to give up. I felt myself glare hard at the Demon Lord. He was a monster that needed to be stopped. Erik, feeling my anger, stepped forward and began to summon his ethereal tendrils behind his back and around his form.
Guess it's time to step in.
I watched as Erik rushed forward and planted his feet beside Diana, reeling his hand back and punching them forward. As he did, a crown of tendrils shot up from the ground around his body and flew at the Demon Lord like a spray of arrows. The Demon Lord glared and sliced each attack out of the way, panting from exhaustion but not ready to surrender. As he sliced through the last one, he sneered at his second son, gritting his teeth.
You!
Erik smirked, licking his lips slightly.
Did you miss me, father?
As he finished his sentence, Erik formed another round of spikes behind him and shot them towards his father. Glaring as he blocked and knocked away each one again with his sword, the Demon Lord let out a dark chuckle.
Like I would miss little insect traitors like you.
The Demon Lord let out a howl before slamming his giant sword into the floor, causing the ground to quake and a large crack to cut through the marble and charge at Erik's position. Erik jumped into the air and landed beside the broken earth, sending out another volley of spikes. Luckily, one rammed into the Demon Lord's shoulder, causing him to shout in pain.
Losing your touch, aren't you?
The Demon Lord snarled before ripping the spike out of his body, letting the wound bleed openly before rushing at his son with his sword held high. However, Diana swooped in and slammed her saber into the path of the sword, forming a deadlock.
I'm not finished with you!
Diana and the Demon Lord pushed against each other, eventually jumping away from each other in aggravation. As Diana landed beside Erik, he stepped in and pointed his hand to the ground, where his tendrils burrowed through the marble and jutted out like a spike trap. The Demon Lord was quick to react, rushing back before the spikes impaled him from below and glared. This match had become an unfair fight for him, but in our case it was something needed to finish him off at last.
Just as cocky as your mother!
Erik suddenly grew a dark face, the tendrils in his body glowing in a red, misty aura. Something snapped in Erik's emotions, and the Demon Lord triggered it.
Don't worry. I'll send you to a place where you'll never have to see her again.
Erik and the Demon Lord then simultaneously rushed forward at each other, with the Demon Lord raising his sword high and Erik moving his tendrils to wrap around the blade. Erik and the Demon Lord went into a deadlock, with the Demon Lord trying to cut through the hold his tendrils had on his sword. Erik, however, formed more free tendrils and shot them at the Demon Lord from below, causing his father to release his sword and jump back, now unarmed. Erik smirked as his tendrils snapped the sword in half with insane ease and tossed the two halves to the side, to be forgotten. I watched in anxiousness, hoping this battle would end soon. It was 2 against 1. The Demon Lord wasn't going to win. I, however, kept my distance to make sure he wouldn't attack me instead. I had no energy to fight. Taking in what Erik had done to his weapon, the Demon Lord
I
snarled.
can beat you even without my sword! Remember who raised you, boy!
Erik let out a large bark of a laugh as his tendrils sharpened into spikes once again.
I'm afraid you're mistaken. My mother raised me. You were too busy doting on your favorite son to care about me or the others.
The Demon Lord growled. His fist became engulfed in red bolts of lightning.
I created you! You owe your very existence to me!
I owe you nothing!
The Demon Lord only laughed before suddenly gasping from pain. I had barely seen what had happened, but I stared at the Demon Lord, and I gasped at the sight. Protruding from the Demon Lord's chest were a red spray of red spikes, dripping with blood. I could barely keep staring as he turned and looked to us in shock. I looked over to see Erik, pointing at the wall behind the Demon Lord, where a collection of spikes jutted through a black void into the Demon Lord's back, effectively skewering
You
him.
never paid attention. You were blinded by pride, and that will be your downfall.
No! He's mine!
I was a little late for that. Erik quickly pulled back his tendrils from his father's body, causing the Demon Lord to fall forward from the pain and momentum. Diana, however, swooped at the Demon Lord and rammed her saber into his chest, a garbled gasp escaping his throat. Without hesitation, Diana swung her sword out and stabbed him once again, driving her blade all the way through him to the hilt and snarling into his face.
Those were for my parents.
A third stab directly through his heart.
For my sister!
Diana finally pulled her sword out and rammed the pommel into the side of his head, pushing him to the ground in a lifeless thud. He was dead by now, eyes glazed over in death's cold, breathless embrace. However, Diana didn't care. Diana quickly straddled his waist, bringing up her saber and using her magic to shorten to a dagger in her hands above her head.
And for every life you took from this world!
Maddened, Diana began to violently slam and pepper stabs into the Demon Lord's chest. Erik rushed over and wrapped his arms around me, covering me from the sight, but he was unable to block the sounds from Diana's sob-filled screams with each stab. I became a bit frightened at Diana and how she was releasing her anger. However, it was entirely justified. He had taken everything from her and caused worldwide chaos. It was only natural to demand revenge, even after death. This was her last stand with him, and she had dominated his very corpse with her blade, uncaring of the lost spirit no longer within it. It went on far too long, to the point where Erik had to let me go and walked forward, pulling Diana off of him. She began to flail, dropping her knife and letting it fade as it hit the ground into nothing.
No! Let go!
Diana!
Erik pulled Diana to her feet and gripped her shoulders, shaking her and glaring into her eyes.
Enough!
Diana's eyes were bloodshot, desperate to keep striking the body, but filled with emotion and broken inhibition. As she finally took in Erik's words, she shut her eyes and dropped to her knees, releasing a wave of sobs and cries. I walked over to Erik's side, pitying Diana. She must have seen so much death. This was her solace and chance to let go. To know her family was gone because of him wrenched pain into my heart, but I knew that it was finally over. They were avenged, and so were the many people who died under his hand. The Demon Lord was dead at last. I felt a weight lift off of my heart and spirit, proving to me that the curse was broken and that the chain that bound me to the abyssal plains was gone. I could go home. I hugged Erik's arm to me, finally letting out a sigh. I was holding in relief of the situation. Erik smiled and kissed my head.
It's over now.
You know what was also over? The sitting position. There we go. Yeah, we can go home now. A wave of joy rushed through my body, happy to know that I was free to go home. I became overjoyed with the idea of returning, walking across the aisle and marrying Erik before returning to my normal life. Life in the demon world was an adventure, but it was time to finish this and leave. I smiled at Erik before kneeling down and placing a hand on Diana's shoulder as she cried, causing her to look up at me. I could only smile at her, try to relieve some of the heartache and the burden she was releasing. It's over, Diana, we won. A small breath of silence ran through the air before Diana wiped the tears from her eyes and nodded, still shaky from the experience.
It's over.
I nodded and gently helped Diana stand before taking Erik's hand and walking towards the entrance of the hall. Diana, however, turned back to look at the Demon Lord's body, stopping us in the tracks.
Was this all worth it? I lost my family because of him. There was so much bloodshed.
Diana tightened a fist at her side, gritting her teeth and shutting her eyes.
I didn't get to say goodbye to my family. My sister.
I felt another wave of empathy run through my body at her words. She wasn't really alone, though. She had Sero. He was truly everything she had left in the world, and he was more than willing to walk through it with her. It was all right, so I reached out to take her shoulder. Diana looked over, seeing the comfort in my eyes despite her broken gaze. Before I could speak, however, a familiar purple light glowed from the Demon Lord's body, catching our eyes and causing us all to look over in shock. What was happening? What the? Before our eyes, a faint purple orb slowly appeared and bobbed up and down in the air, looking to us. The orb that had haunted me and was expelled from me floated over the dead body of the Demon Lord as if it had been there the entire time. You. The orb moved in a circle above the Demon Lord's body, letting the faint trace trail behind it temporarily draw a circle in the air. As it returned to its spot, it released a pulse of light. The light slowly drifted towards Diana, impacting her chest and making her glow a bit before the light faded away. Confused, Diana stared at the spirit, trying to figure out what it had done to her. Was it an attack? Slowly, Diana became wide-eyed at it in familiarity. With a shaky hand, Diana reached out towards the orb, lost emotion in her eyes as she kept her sights on the spirit.
Oh, Arabelle.
I stared at Diana in shock. It had a name? How did Diana know the spirit at all? It was like she was grasping at straws. How could Diana know who it was? The orb floated forward, stopping in front of the Demon Lord's corpse as Diana took a step towards it.
Hi, Azair.
I was wrong. Diana hit the nail on the head with its name and seemed to be acquainted with it. Diana took a couple more steps forward before dropping to her knees in the middle of the hall. I watched as tears began to stream down her face, and her body began to quake. The orb slowly floated over to Diana and hovered just within arm's reach of her. Diana's hand shakily lifted up past her chest and over her mouth.
Arabelle.
It's okay. It's okay, big sister.
Creepy little ghost thing. Big sister, Diana let out a tearful gasp before reaching forward and taking the orb into her arms, pulling the orb into a tight embrace. The orb seemed to shiver in the hug it was in, but didn't react in any other way. Diana, however, became a weeping mess, crying and shaking while holding Arabelle close.
Arabelle. Arabelle.
I couldn't believe it. The spirit was Arabelle, Diana's sister? What kind of coincidence was that? How did Diana not know herself? How did Arabelle not tell me? It's obviously knew Diana just from how they were embracing. Still, the sight of Diana in mournful tears gripped my heart. Diana lost her sister and suddenly was able to speak to her once more, even after Arabelle's death. It was as if fate wanted to apologize for taking her family away. I almost became a crying mess myself. It was a very tearful reunion after a dramatic battle. I didn't know how to feel in the situation we were in. Diana didn't seem to care. She continued to cry and hold Arabelle. Erik wrapped an arm around me, comforting me as I wiped my eyes and tried to avoid weeping. Diana, however, didn't seem to care about the tears running down her face.
This is the first time I've heard you cry, sister.
I'm sorry. I tried to save you. But
It's okay. The Demon Lord did this to me.
It suddenly made sense. Arabelle was an unborn baby, so it wouldn't have known its name. The Demon Lord was the one who killed her. So the puzzle pieces were connecting perfectly. Arabelle then phased out of Diana's hands, making the demoness gasp and look at the orb. Arabelle, however, floated in place in front of Diana as she continued to speak.
The Demon Lord made me find the human.
What? Arabelle was working for the Demon Lord. She helped the imps bring me to the demon world?
Arabelle, you were the human all along. Why not just tell me?
He made me. But now I have nowhere to go.
Arabelle.
Something in the air didn't seem right. Something about Arabelle became off, and I couldn't place my finger on it. The more I stared, the more concerned I became, and the heavier the nervousness in my gut grew.
Isaiah, I love you so much. But
The air seemed to freeze, and the room became still as Arabelle floated back towards the body of the Demon Lord. As Arabelle stopped, she began to glow a dark red and purple color.
I can't forgive you.
All at once, the orb flashed and vanished into thin air, only a misty gas present in the aftermath.
Arabelle.
We looked around trying to pin down where she had gone. As the Demon Lord's hand suddenly lifted up and slammed into the ground, we shot our heads back at his corpse. Seeing it began to animate. Oops. I have a new mouse, so it's a little weird. Curling his hands over and using whatever strength he had to get onto his knees and eventually his feet. What? The Demon Lord's body stood up and steadied itself on the ground on its 2 feet, heavy and void of life. What was happening? How could this be? As the Demon Lord's head lifted to look up at Diana, I gasped. His eyes were glossed over in a dark purple color, almost black. Blood continued to pour from the wounds of his body, but the body continued to move as if it had a small breath of life.
You let him kill me.
Oops.
You let him kill mother and father.
Arabelle.
You let the human live and let us die. I can never forgive you.
The voice of the Demon Lord and Arabelle seemed to fuse in a dissonant harmony as the body slowly began to march towards the unmoving Diana. My mind screamed for her to move and run, but Diana didn't seem to be immobile at the oncoming danger. Diana, move! She remained in place, shocked and frozen at what her sister had said and done. I could barely make out her hair and body shuddering in natural fear, but she wouldn't move at all. Diana! I stood there lost in what was happening. When she reached out, Arabelle grabbed hold of Diana's throat and lifted her, making Diana choke and flail her legs in the air.
Say sorry with your life.
Erik and I became witness to Arabelle crushing Diana's throat. I could barely hear her cries as the snapping of her neck echoed through the hall. Diana! As Orabelle let her body drop to the floor, Diana's corpse made a painful thud echo through the room behind my scream. However, Orabelle then turned her head to look at me and Erik. Orabelle loomed towards us, filling me with dread. The stench of the Demon Lord's corpse became unbearable, despite not being dead long. I still had no energy to fight. The realization made me step back from the undead Demon Lord.
You hurt me. Hurt me. Now I'll hurt you.
Orabelle picked up the Demon Lord's broken blade parts and slammed them together, fusing them back into one sword with her energy. How was that possible? She was a spirit. Orabelle then started to charge at us, raising the sword barely over Erik's and my heads. I prepared to defend myself and became ready for the attack. But my vision was blocked by the back of Erik's head. That's not nice. Erik! Sticking out of Erik's back was the Demon Lord's blade. It was run through his chest towards me, barely inches away from my own chest. Erik, impelled, twitched as he stared down at the sword's blade. My heart began to cry and scream. This couldn't have been happening, no. Orabelle quickly pulled the blade back out and sheathed it back into Erik's body, as if she wanted to make sure that she had killed him. I barely heard his last breath of life. No! I became so absorbed in the sound of my scream that I couldn't register Orabelle pulling out the blade and stepping around Erik, running it through my neck. Ta-da! So, thank you all so much for watching this episode of The Bad Ends for Erik. If you enjoyed, please leave a like. If you have something to say, please leave a comment. And if you would like to see more bad endings for other characters, please subscribe, and I will see you all later.